Hello and welcome back to Sweden Innovation Days. My name is Ylva Strander. I work with Vinnova and I'm here to talk about a topic together with Professor Benjamin Horton. We're going to talk about that we must move faster with climate transition. And Professor Horton is Professor of Earth Science at Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. You're also director of the Earth Observatory. You're a review expert on the IPCC. You're a consultant to Volvo Group and Schneider Electrics, to Malaysia, to the US, and also actually on climate adaptation to Saudi Arabia. Your resume and your research spans from research on rising sea levels, temperatures, and heat waves, superstorms, disease outbreaks, floods, new migration patterns. It's really biblical punishments. You've published 260 articles, and we're really, really happy, Professor Horton, to have you here at Sweden Innovation Days. Some of us heard hopefully most of us heard your keynote speech yesterday, and now we would like you to elaborate a little bit on this topic, that we must move faster with climate transition. Welcome, Professor Horton.
Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon from Singapore. So we've got a 45-minute session today, so we can delve a little bit more deeper into climate change issues. And I'm going to take you through some of the slides you saw yesterday, but I'm going to try and finish the story on if you show up the first slide, please. Really, what are the consequences of a 1.5 degree C world? And what I hope we can do by the end of this 45-minute segment is that I hope we can reinforce that there needs to be action on climate change, because our future on climate is rather set. It's we know the pathways into the future. We have these incredible climate models that can predict the amount of temperature increase that will happen depending about the amount of carbon dioxide. We also know the solutions towards getting towards carbon neutral world, but the key is action. That's going to involve a behavioral change. That is going to involve a change in the balance of power. When you think about climate change, and if we solve climate change, you solve social inequality. Because at the moment, the vested interest in maintaining the status quo is such a small percentage of our global population. I asked this question yesterday, obviously the time difference, I never knew whether it was asked as a question, is how many people are online today are directly benefiting from the continued exploitation of petroleum. So with 2,000 people in the audience yesterday, I would say maybe 2 or 3, maybe 4 or 5, certainly less than 10. Variety of people in the world, vast majority benefit indirectly from petroleum in providing the power. But if we know that there are cheaper solutions, especially if we consider the true environmental impacts on carbon, it's a very, very small percentage, probably globally less than about 50,000 shareholders, dependent upon these oil companies, holding at hostage 8 billion people. We need behavioral change. We need to know as an individual that we can be the generation that saves planet Earth, that makes the Earth more sustainable, that respects other human beings, doesn't matter their color, their creed, their sexuality, their religion, that respects Mother Nature, works with it, not against it. Data is everything. Data is the truth. When an ice sheet melts, it doesn't have a conscience. It obeys the laws of physics. Next slide, please. By natural fact, take me to the previous one. So this slide that you see in front of you, if you didn't see it yesterday, is the state of our climate. And the climate controls, I look out my window, the air that I breathe. The climate controls the water that I drink. And the climate controls the food that I eat. Every single person on planet Earth's existence depends upon a stable climate. Every single person depends upon a stable climate. And right now, it's unstable. Just look at those temperatures. So what we have there are daily temperatures of planet Earth. On the x-axis is the day and the year. On the y-axis is temperature change. In the grey, you can see all the years from 1940 to 2020. The black line's the median, the 50th percentile. And then look what happened in 2023. It's not just at the top of that grey band. It smashed it. And 2024, you know, climate change is very, very complex, incredibly complex to take your climate projection, for example, to tell you what's going to happen in Stockholm or Sweden on a particular decade or year. But it's very, very easy to know that we were going to smash records. So it doesn't surprise me. And what worries the hell out of me right now is where we're going to be in a few months' time. We're going to look back if we don't do anything about climate change, we're going to look back as 2023 being a world where the climate was fantastic and stable. Oh, we only had forest fires covering the western half of Canada. Oh, we only had forest fires covering the whole of Greece. Oh, we only had temperatures in Rio, which it is right now, at a heat index of 64 degrees C. Oh, in the Sudan, oh, it was only 46 degrees C. Because in the future, it will get a lot worse. And 2023 will be thought of as, why can't we return to a climate like that? That's our future that holds you. Why? Next slide. So one of the things that frustrates me highly is that we do so much work as climate scientists to try and help policymakers, governments, industries. And we don't do it to line our pockets. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you can get an indication. Yes, that this is, in my flat, a really small bed. It's all I can afford. You know, I was tasked in 2013 about a consortium to look at the tipping points of the Earth's climate system. Okay, so we were a consortium that was looking at the tipping points of the Greenland ice sheet and West Antarctica. Okay, so we stopped all we were doing. I didn't get paid a single cent for this. I took hours away from being a parent to my children, to being a husband to my wife, to spending social time with my friends to answer that problem. That's what a climate scientist does. He spends every living, waking moment to provide this information. So we came together with the tipping point being 1.5 degrees C. This was part of the Paris Agreement. Okay, so again, what a fantastic meeting that was, because I thought that all the hours that I'd spent, along with my colleagues, looking at that tipping point, and the tipping point is that our temperatures cannot go above 1.5 degrees C, above pre-industrial. And we had this agreement, Paris Agreement, and I thought, wow, surely now that policymakers know a threshold that you cannot go beyond, that we would have legislation, we'd have regulation, we'd have behavioural change. I don't mean to swear, but what absolute BS. What a waste of my time. I should have stayed at home and said, no, I don't believe in the general public. I don't believe in the population. I don't believe in businesses. Because this slide looks at annual temperatures. We can see that we've crossed that threshold. even just when looking from 1940 to 2023, you've got a switch of over 1.5 degrees C. Next slide, please. So this has a lot of consequences. One of the problems of the climate system is the climate system has a series of feedback mechanisms. That means a relatively small, in terms of total gas volume of the atmosphere of carbon dioxide, can have significant changes on how the Earth works. So this is a classic positive feedback mechanism. Ice on our planet reflects about 90% of incoming solar radiation. So incoming solar radiation will hit sea ice in the Arctic and reflect back out into space, having no warming on the Earth as a whole. But if you melt that sea ice by warming temperatures from an increase in carbon dioxide, instead of the incoming solar radiation reflecting back out into space, it hits an ocean surface. An ocean surface, instead of reflecting 90%, absorbs 70%. So the oceans get even warmer. Then you lose more ice. Then the oceans get even warmer and you lose more ice. And the Earth starts to boil. So that slide is looking at the albedo, the amount of incoming solar radiation that's reflected back out into space. And it's on a downward trend with an acceleration in the last few decades. Next slide, please. So we're a blue planet. So you can say, oh, okay, your atmospheric air temperatures, that's what's happening on the land. Is the ocean coming to our rescue? Well, yes, because it has absorbed huge amounts of heat. But our oceans themselves record this heat and are warming up incredibly. They sort of smooth out some of the decadal variations that you see in the atmosphere. We've got a straight line increase running from when our observational measurements started, really, when we had the year of the ocean in the 1950s, moving through to the present day. Next slide, please. So this is one of the slides that has, if you read, I don't know, I mean, I'm not really big on social media because, well, you know, being a climate scientist, if you're on general social media, the vitriol that you get is pretty horrendous, and I do not want to deal with that. But I am on LinkedIn because LinkedIn is where I see the future for climate science, is interacting with business leaders. So on LinkedIn, I try to take climate information and distribute it to business partners. So these are one of the graphs where in the climate field, we're petrified about, because in the oceans, we are not just like the atmosphere. We are breaking records, but on the oceans, I mean, none of the audience needs to be in any doubt that we're in real trouble here. So you've got temperatures of the oceans in individual days averaged over the Earth, and this comes from satellite-based measurements and in situ buoys that began really in the 1950s. As I said, 1957 was the year of the ocean where we started to systematically collect our data. We can see 2023, beginning in about March, April, it became the warmest oceans ever recorded, and it smashed that. Look at 2024. I mean, we're about 8 standard deviations above the mean. And what is worrying our climate scientists is that we are now in a new climate system where all the models, all the weather models of the past are meaningless. The data that's been collected by, let's say, an insurance industry to look at risk is meaningless, because our climate will start performing just how the climate scientists were worried about, completely different than the past. The amount of energy, so if we go from March the 1st last year to March the 1st this year, the amount of energy added to the oceans was 9 zettajoules. Now, to the vast majority of you go like, what is a zettajoule? Just to put it in context, the amount of energy used by the 8 billion people on planet Earth last year was 0.6 of a zettajoule. The oceans have absorbed so much heat from the greenhouse gas effect. Next slide, please. And then this is more of a sort of like, you know, traditionally what I am is a paleoclimate scientist. So when I was trained as a PhD student, I was looking at what the climate is today and how does it compare with the past? Because what you want to always try and understand is this change in the modern era? Is it part of natural variability? But what we see is if we go back, if we look at the x-axis, this is not months, years, centuries. This is thousands of years. So we're going back 150,000 years, where we have accurate measurements from understanding the orbit of the Earth around the sun and climate archives, the energy balance of the Earth. And this is in watts per meter squared. And you can see that for, I don't know, 149.9 thousand years, we were in balance. And then carbon dioxide was extracted out of the ground, originally as coal, then oil, then natural gas. We lost our lungs of the earth in terms of our natural vegetation and our corals. And now we have this energy imbalance. Next slide, please. So then the question is why? And I posed this yesterday to you, that we've known about the impact of carbon dioxide since the 1850s. The first models were developed in the 1900s. The oil industry, one of the things about the oil industry is, you know, what is their product? The product is petroleum. Are you telling me that an oil industry does not know the impacts of that product? And of course they do. You know, when I was doing my undergraduate degree, when you were looking through papers in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s to find information about how the climate warmed, you turned to Chevron, BP, the American Association of Geologists, or Petroleum Geologists, because they knew the information. And the relationship is really quite simple. So here we're plotting in the blue and the red bars is the annual temperatures of the Earth, okay, and then the amount of carbon dioxide on our planet. That is such a strong relationship. I mean, you know, where's the doubt? Why was there misinformation about this? Why are people thinking, oh, climate change, particularly before we saw observational evidence of the number of people that are impacted? Why did we doubt this? You know, if this was a different graphic that was, I don't know, let's think about this, any type of economic indicator of GDP. So if you had such a close relationship of GDP versus an indicator, I don't know, life expectancy, and then you had an ability to know the pathways of life expectancy, to know where GDP is, and the solutions to get that life expectancy, you know what to do. So I find it staggering. Next slide, please. So I can ask any of you, I mean, this is something that, you know, I do with high school kids and younger when we're talking about data. So here we have the amount of carbon dioxide in our planet, sort of smoothed since the 1880s. Can you click the button again, please? Then we have the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the experts on climate change. I was a review editor. These are our pathways. We have what COP28 has agreed upon is the SSP2 4.5. And then you've got the pathway we've been on for the last 30 years and show zero signs of changing. I mean, 2023, you know, that year was the warmest year since we had the warmest day, which was July the 6th, smashed in July the 8th. July was the warmest month ever recorded. June, July, August, warmest 3 months. And 2023 was the warmest year since recorded, and probably the warmest year for 120,000 years. Turn to carbon dioxide. We produced more carbon dioxide in 2023, smashing previous records. When was the previous record? 2022. It would have been even higher in 2020 and 2021, but we had the pandemic, okay? So 2023 was the maximum amount of carbon. So where's this regulation? Where's this legislation? Where's this green transition? The COP28 wants to talk about, oh, we're on a transition. Give me a break. You produce more carbon dioxide in 2023 than you ever have done. You chopped down more trees in 2023 than you ever have done. You destroyed more coral reefs in 2023 than you ever have done. So, you know, the audience can, you know, you can do a poll. What pathway are we on? We're on SSP 5.8.5. Are we going to change that? Not without behavioral change, not without innovation, okay? Can you click it? Okay, so there's temperature. Just to reinforce that, wow, this is a relationship. okay, 1-to-1. Why there has been doubt, I struggle to understand. Next slide. And this is where our models project. Okay, can you just click it, please? So there is 2.8 degrees of warming or over 5 degrees of warming. I mean, quite shocking for planet Earth. And that's set. You know, we have a choice. What future do you want? What I've not put on there is what the Paris Agreement is, because it's laughable to put that on there. We're nowhere near it. But the Paris Agreement does mean the Earth survives. Next slide, please. Then if you come down to Singapore, and urban areas, Stockholm will be the same, London will be the same. You've got an additional problem. So you've got the heating of the atmosphere, but then you've got what's called an urban heat island effect. And this is what I did my undergraduate thesis on. You replace natural vegetation, which cools a region, and you replace it with urban structures, concrete, asphalt, industry, which emits hot air, and you get this urban heat island effect. So Singapore, next slide, please. So if we look at these graphics, so what you've got there is carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, global mean temperature, and Singapore's temperature. And just look at the axes, the magnitude of change. So globally, our temperatures have gone up about 1 degree C, but in Singapore, they've gone up about 3 degrees C. Next slide, please. But there's also incredible, so you're going to have urban cities are going to warm up more than the rural areas, and we're an increasingly urban Earth. It's estimated today that more people live in cities than lived on planet Earth in 2008. We've got this huge human. That's an amazing opportunity. Climate change poses so many opportunities because it's easy to solve. We know that to solve climate change, we need to look at the developed West. The big historical polluters need to answer for climate change. This is also where all the tech is. That tech needs to be given to the developing countries so they can have the energy and power, but they do it in a sustainable, carbon neutral way. So cities are going to move. We have to solve it in our city, but there's going to be uneven heating. So if we look at this slide, on May the 12th was the warmest day in Singapore's history, okay? When we talk about behavioural change, it's quite interesting, okay? So it's the warmest day in Singapore's history. So, you know, I'm based here in Singapore, you know, we get the readings, you know, news agencies say, Ben, can you come on national TV? Okay, so I come on to Channel News Asia in the evening, and I'm there in the studios, got all my lines ready, and they say, look, I'm sorry, there's a breaking news story that's bumped you off. And I'm like, oh my God, what's happened? What's more important than the warmest temperatures in Singapore's history? Okay. Is it, you know, a huge geohazard disaster, earthquake, volcano? Is it an outbreak of, you know, another pandemic? Is it a regional war? It was something far more serious than that to the Singaporean general public. And that was the lack of availability of Taylor Swift tickets. Now, you may laugh about that, but that's society's perception of the risk of climate change. May the 12th, that's the distribution of heat on Singapore, okay? Look at the difference. There is a 6.5 degree C difference in Singapore between the urban areas of Singapore and the rural areas of Singapore. What does a smart person do? Okay, so there's a story behind this. Stories are always important, okay? So I'm looking for a new flat. My previous lease has ended and I'm looking for a new flat. Where am I going to choose to live? Well, I want to live in an area where I can sit out on my balcony most of the day. I want to live in an area where I don't need air conditioning on. I want to live in an area where I can walk safely. So I picked the yellow areas. I was armed with that map. I told my real estate agent, this is where I want to live. And they'll say, oh, well, I've got these really nice condos we can look at elsewhere. And I'm saying, no, I don't want to go there. Why don't you want to go? It's too hot. And they look at me like really strange, what? And I go like, I am picking the areas in yellow on this map. for where I live. And that's where I live right now. Next slide, please. What about the future for Singapore? So Singapore perhaps has the highest resolution climate model in the world. They spend a lot of money. You can't, you know, Singapore is a small country. It's only like 50 kilometers across. It's a very small country. So global models aren't going to cut it. Neither are regional models. You're going to get a cityscape model. So it perhaps has the best climate model in the world developed by the Singaporean government. And these are some of the data that comes out of it. So these, with the humidity, these are days that are unsafe to live in Singapore. And, you know, look at the high emission scenario, SSP 58.5, okay? We're talking about every single day in the year. That's the reality of climate change. Next slide, please. We'll just skip over some of these. This is the other tip. I was going to talk about a variety of tipping points. Let's skip over this. So you've got more time for questions. Next slide, please. This is all the area in Singapore that will be flooded. Next slide, please. This slide is an interesting one. Okay, so this is my why I get very, very upset. You know, so what we've got here is the warming of planet Earth, and we've got in the red stripes, you know, Ed Hawkins sort of warming stripes of planet Earth. Then we plotted alongside it the amounts of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. You see this incredible increase from the 1960s at around 320 going up to around 4. We're over 420 now in 2023. And then we get the timeline of all these meetings. You know, the first World Climate Conference, the first Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in 1990, the first Conference of Parties, you know, COP1 was in 1995. You have the Kyoto Protocol, the Copenhagen Accord, the Paris Agreement. They've all failed. You know, I think of myself as a very, very good climate scientist, but on impacts on policy, I'm a complete failure. Next slide, please. Why? Why? Well, it's not at anyone's top of their agenda. You know, half the planet has either voted, Indonesia just voted, or are going to vote in so-called free democracies. And it's not on the agenda as a top voting priority. Switzerland, it's number 2. But you could say that that's because they live in a country where they've been observing climate change through the melting of their glaciers for decades. Next slide, please. But there is hope. 86% of people on planet Earth want action on climate change. I think the vast majority of people are a little bit paralyzed about what they can do. And I think, and why I agreed to talk last night and today to the Swedish innovation, is that innovation is the answer. I would task every single one of you to spend as much time as you can in pursuing climate. And I said this last night, like your life depends upon it. Because it does. It just does. So do it for yourself. If you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for your children. Do it for your loved one. Do it for my kids. Hey? I spent 25 years studying climate. I know exactly what's going to happen, but I can't solve it. I didn't do my PhD on innovation. I wasn't an engineer or a material scientist. I'm not good at communicating. I didn't do a communication degree. I'm a climate scientist, and I know where the Earth is headed. Act like your life depends on it, because it quite literally does. Thank you very much. I'm open to questions.
No, thank you very much. That's a very, very clear and a very, very harsh message. So what do you say to we see right now a large proportion of the population and maybe also the politicians that go quickly from climate denial to maybe climate nihilism, from we have no problem to it's too late to do something. What do you say to them?
Well,
What
my
is
first
needed?
answer is that's wrong. That's vested interest trying to state that the population denies climate change, that the population sees that there's no hope. I work at a university. I don't see no hope in all of these young people. All I see is opportunities, and all I see is their enthusiasm, and all I see is ideas. And we've got the development through AI, generative models. We can track data on the ground, in space. We know the impacts on health and finance and biodiversity. I don't agree with that in the slightest. I, again, think it is messaging from people who have a vested interest. That's why it's up to the individual to hold people accountable for this. So if someone says to you, oh, so-and-so's a climate denial, I don't believe that, unless they work for the oil company or they've been bought off by the oil company. No, seriously. I mean, why do we have a disagreement on this? And we've seen it again and again and again.
Yeah, it's a very good question. Why do we have a disagreement on this?
It's the balance of power.
Why is climate politicized? Why is it political?
Because it's a change in the balance of power. People who are very, very powerful don't want this change. I have benefited from the balance of power all my life. I'm white, I'm a male, and English is my first language. There has been a balance of power to white males who speak English as it's colonialism, yeah? It's just the maintaining of the balance of power. Small group of individuals influencing it, and it has to change, yeah?
And there's so much that drives change right now. I mean, the big technological shifts, they will also offset the balance of power. So can you say something about how can innovation help? What is the role of innovation? Because that's really why a lot of people here listen.
Well, innovation is the catalyst for change, correct? I mean, just by definition of what innovation is, it's developing something we've not had before. We know about how to transition our energy system. We've just not done it fast enough, and we've not shown the alternative. So I actually think that innovators, a little bit like climate scientists for the future, need to be a little bit of a different breed. It's fine developing the next unicorn, but it can't be all about economic gain. It's got to be about also thinking about this sustainably. And it's also going to have to be about messaging. So you can't just have innovators who just want to do it because they think they can get a patent and make their money, or they can develop a small company that then gets bought out by a larger company. We have to think about, it's just like a climate scientist. I thought growing up in my career that all I needed to do was run my computer models, show the progression of climate change, and oh, bingo, of course, a politician's going to want to look after his community. I was misled. So I was misled and naive, ignorant. University is not the greatest system. That's the other thing. A university is very old, traditional. We have a way of doing things, very hard for us to be innovators. So it's up to the next community. But I do believe you've got to do more than just think about economic gains. And I see that, you see what the young generation. I was at an innovation fair at NTU. And so the old school people, they brought somebody in who, unicorn or what have you, and said, look, we could be the ones that can make your next million. And this woman put her hands up and says, I don't want to make the next million. I obviously want to be financially stable and successful, but I want to save planet Earth. And they couldn't deal with that. So it's like, what? You don't want to make $1 million. You're fine making $500,000, but the rest is about planet Earth. And she went, well, of course.
And you know a really positive trend, at least here in Sweden, is that will go hand in hand, right? There's more and more business leaders, more and more innovators that see, this massive change that needs to happen, this biggest transition maybe in the history of humanity.
Yeah.
That is also
So,
a market opportunity, right?
The key is publicizing how this works. I can list off failures and disasters, but it's very hard to list off successes. And they need to be publicized so the public knows there are opportunities and choices out there, and we're not given this doom and gloom. We know exactly where we're headed. So as a climate scientist, I can tell you where we're headed, and I can give you a probability of, catastrophic decline. But successes, we can solve this. We have to solve this.
So and I believe the tide has turned really in this matter. So a few years ago, on an innovation event like this, climate wouldn't be a top topic. Maybe you wouldn't have been invited as a keynote speaker, but right now there's an awareness and a lot of people also in the business community want to put their effort and their money into this cause.
I agree with you on that, and there has to be lots of voices on climate change. Okay, there has to be, there has to be a voice for the scientists that will tell you, well, if we don't do this, this is where we're headed. But also, if you do this, this is where you're headed. I do not believe that climate change should influence anybody really negatively. What I would like to do, for example, and I didn't have the opportunity, I went to Saudi Arabia recently. You mentioned that I do some consulting. They held a sustainability conference, okay? So I came in and sort of gave a little bit of a similar message to today. And Saudi Aramco spoke after me, and they gave a very different message. A lot of this sort of like, we need to remove ourselves from transition. The latest messaging from the oil company is that basically we need their energy. Without their energy, the developing world cannot develop. And without this energy, the lights will go off and we'll have real problems with health and security. And that's a very mixed messaging on this. But what I would have liked to have done would have been to sit down with the chairman of Saudi Aramco and say to them, right, okay, if we do have to transition, how would you do it? If that was like, there's no choice about this, how is Saudi Arabia, a country that has gained huge wealth from the fact that they have a raw material under their ground, and they're fully in their rights to exploit that material and sell it around the world? But how do you get a transition where it's carbon neutral? And just as they are they employ some of the smartest people in the world. Just say there's no choice on this. We're not having this mixed messaging. Saudi Arabia needs to be carbon neutral by 2050. How do you do it? So you have to have them at the table.
Yeah.
But then you have to have me. And then you have to have communication experts, and you have to have engineers, lots of innovators, communicate. And you say, how do you do it? You sit them in the room until there's a pathway for success. And then you say, right, we're doing it. Because what you want, what Saudi Arabia wants, is they want a pathway which maintains their economic prosperity. Of course they do. What's wrong with that?
It's their job.
It's their job. So I fully understand that. So how do we do it? So I don't, this mixed messaging and this communication, I've had enough of it. Just say, we do need to be carbon neutral by 2050. How do we do it? How do we do it so Saudi Arabia, all other oil-producing nations can maintain their, and that's all about thinking about things like carbon capture and storage, restoring the natural world, using AI to find these solutions, involving innovators. How do we catalyze change? Yeah, because otherwise,
we talked before a little bit about the importance of policy, right? And the European Union and the European Commission have been very ambitious in the past years, and they passed a lot of legislation that helps basically businesses transition and societies to transition. Now, we see other massive societal challenges that catches people's attention. We have the Russia's aggression in Ukraine, and you mentioned a few others. So what would you say to, you know, there's an election now, European Parliament goes to election in the spring. How do we make this a top on the agenda for the business community, for the innovators? And avoid this backlash that a lot of people are talking about. A policy pause is something that's discussed now, right?
Yeah. I mean, you know, you can see that obviously the world isn't. Well, the thing about it, I mean, how do I answer this? You know, we've obviously got horrific regional wars in Europe and the Middle East right now, where innocent lives are being lost, where it's like they're worthless. It's heartbreaking. Take us back just 3 years ago, and we were in the middle of a pandemic where our economies were shut down. We were isolated, which is against human nature, because of a virus that we didn't know how to control except through social distancing. But we have been through regional wars. Maybe it's closer to home because we're talking in Sweden, and the Ukraine and Russia are within a very short distance. But we've had regional wars throughout the 20th, 19th, and earlier centuries, mainly driven by white men, dictators. But we've had those wars and we've come out of them with economic prosperity. We've had pandemics before, you know, before COVID-19, it was SARS, Ebola, Spanish flu, the Great Plague. All of these we recovered from. Most recent one, it's interesting to know, was solved by a small group of scientists. An incredible global action took place through the World Health Authority, distributing those vaccines around the world. Yes, there was some unevenness, but globally, it was a huge success story. But climate change, we've never experienced.
No.
We've grown up in a civilization of stable climate. So it's all about education, about that this is the big threat to our very existence. And then, interestingly, from a world war, how the Ukraine started, I don't think, no one predicted that Putin would act like that. No one predicted the scale of the massacre by Hamas. And so it's setting wheels of motion that were storylines, but we didn't know how to predict them. The pandemic, we never predicted that it would have such an effect globally so quickly. But climate change, I can tell you exactly where it's going.
No. And you could argue, I mean, that climate change will, if anything, increase these other massive.
You know, I think the big concern of a climate scientist is, you know, not that we're going to get heat that's going to cause massive starvation on a global scale. The big concern about climate change is that it causes human migration.
No.
Human migration impacts politics, and there are too many nuclear warheads on this planet.
Very true.
And that is the big worry, I think, of climate scientists, is we're setting in the wheels of motion of human migration. And we, you know, people, you know, as a person, you will do anything you can to save your loved ones. So if you've got a crisis where you are because of a drought or a wildfire or a rising, you will move. So Singapore's classic example. Singapore's classic. It is incredibly prosperous.
Yeah.
You've got all these countries in the region. If something happens here to do with a drought and wildfires, where would you turn to? And what will Singapore do?
Professor Horton, we're running out of time. We could talk for hours about this. It's the most important topic in the world. We actually today we have the Swedish Climate Policy Council producing a report on the Swedish climate policy. So that's going to be interesting to follow. I want to thank you so much for coming here, talking to us and stressing this. And I really hope that all of you out there follow Professor Horton's words and put your effort and your energy into where your heart is. Thank you so much.
Welcome to this session on building urban capacity for just climate transitions. My name is Kerstin Hemström and I am part of the Center for Sustainable Urban Futures at Växus, West Sweden Nexus for Sustainable Development. And with me today are some of my colleagues of a new initiative called Just Transitions, Swedish Research School on Governance for Just Urban and Regional Climate Transitions. This is a transdisciplinary initiative that is funded by the Swedish Government Research Council for Sustainable Development, Formas. It involves 3 universities, Linköping University, Gothenburg University, and Chalmers University of Technology, and 5 public bodies in Sweden, the municipalities of Norrköping and Linköping, the city of Gothenburg, the region Västra Götaland, and the County Administrative Board of Östergötland. And it builds on the needs and challenges involved for these local actors to build capacity for just climate transitions. But why just climate transitions? What does it mean that it is transdisciplinary? And how does this build capacity in response to real-world issues? These are some of the things we will reflect on with participants of this initiative present here in the studio and online. First, I turn to Rickard Wallenius, who is Associate Professor in Environmental Social Science at the University of Gothenburg and teach and do research on climate justice and energy transitions. Rickard, we often hear how we need to act urgently, better and faster to accelerate our response to climate change. Tell us, from your perspective, what does this need to involve?
Yes, this needs to involve a lot of things, of course, and I fully agree with that. We need to act. We need to act with full force. And including a lot of policies, from getting the prices right to investments, large-scale investments, and so on. But beyond those aspects, we also need to consider legitimacy, that these reforms or measures are legitimate and that they have some kind of public support. And that is also important. And this is where kind of climate justice and concerns for a just transition come into play. So there's this widespread feeling, I guess, in society that the burdens and benefits of both climate change and climate measures to deal with climate change are not equally shared. So climate justice, I would say, is about addressing these climate injustices that are perceived. And there's many good reasons to do so. I think there are, first of all, we have normative reasons, what we think is right and wrong. And there's these experts in ethics and so on who have a lot of strong arguments for why we should consider normative perspectives. And that would include, for instance, the polluters pay principle, the idea that those who have messed up, who have polluted, should also clean up their mess. And that is a principle that often points to the kind of richer segments of society. Even if you look within the society or between countries, it's often those who have the larger means who have been polluting the most. So this clear justice principle at the bottom of that. And there are also another strong ethical principle is about prioritizing those who are worse off when we do things in society. So it's not those who are kind of less well off should not be affected worst in any type of transition or change in society. And also points to this justice perspective. So we have the normative aspects. We also have like another type of argument that are more focusing on expediency and efficiency. So unless what we do to mitigate climate change is perceived as fair, there's a risk that it won't have public support, would even evoke resistance from parts of society. And that would risk to slow down the process and even make it coming to a halt. And so, for instance, within political science, there's this debate on what is called climate policy backlash. So we all know, I think, about some climate measures that have been resisted and even rolled back. And that could be, one example is rural dwellers who unjustifiably feel that they are affected unjustifiably by, for instance, increasing fuel prices or by wind power development, and take measures to protest or exhibit voting behaviors and so on in order to stop that. But there are also a lot of all other potential or real conflicts, and they are often motivated by justice. Within urban planning, and that you mentioned, we have like the mobility aspect, how to prioritize public resources and public space between, you know, cars and bikes and public transportation and so on. This might invoke conflicts, and the entire idea that we should have tax increases as a means of mitigating environmental bads. Whereas it can mean that kind of vulnerable groups are hit more than other groups, while the well-off people are able to kind of buy their way out. So this is also leading to conflicts. So it's of course a very complex matter, and there's perhaps no easy way out, but I think it's very important to at least consider these social and distributive kind of effects of designing different policies. So not only thinking about mitigating climate change, but also how kind of it will play out in terms of normative effects and efficiency and expediency. Thanks.
Thank you, Richard. Our next speaker is Merit Polk. Merit is a professor of human ecology at the University of Gothenburg, where she does research on urban planning conflicts, on collaboration around complex societal challenges, and on developing transdisciplinary research approaches. Merit. Richard mentioned several different sides of just climate transitions, and that it is important, but there is no real consensus on what this involves. What does this mean for how we take on just climate transitions in our research school?
Thanks, Kerstin, and thanks, Richard. Richard brought up a number of really important points here, and I think that it's important to understand, from this kind of complex of issues that Richard outlined, it's important to understand the types of challenges that we are dealing with when we're focusing on urban governance for just climate transitions. And one way of thinking about them is in terms of wicked problems. And those of you who have heard me speak before know that I love the word wicked. It doesn't exist in Swedish. It's such a great word because it doesn't just mean complex or difficult. It implies that we have different types of challenges around these problems. And the first is that, as Richard outlined, is that we don't agree about them. We don't agree about what climate change, what it is, what causes it, and how it can best be solved. These types of problems are highly contested. Another problem is that these types of problems don't have any clear boundaries. They're both local and global, and in the present and in the future. And because of this kind of lack of boundaries, they cross both our disciplinary subject areas as well as our administrative and all of our decision-making levels in the way we organize society. And this lack of boundaries also means that they are caused and influenced by many different types of processes and individuals and companies and et cetera. So we need different types of knowledge and expertise to understand and deal with them. And this also means that they engage, this kind of that we don't agree on them, that we need different types of knowledge. They engage many different actors and interest groups, which all have their own agendas, their own goals, and their ways of working together. So the question then for us is that, how do we work with a wicked problem like governing, just climate transitions in a research school? And all of these complexities, all of these challenges related to wicked problems, that we don't agree on them, that they need a broad base of knowledge and expertise, and that they engage many different actors and organizations. All of these challenges point to the need for different types of collaboration. And that's basically the focus of our research school, is to bring together different types of knowledge and expertise from both research and from different public organization and other types of groups. And we do this to carry out our 7 research projects. And this is called a transdisciplinary research approach. And I just like to define it because it's kind of a horrible word. So the trans and transdisciplinary means that we not only transcend our disciplines within the university, but we transcend the boundaries of the university itself to bring in other types of knowledge and expertise into our research projects. But it also means for our practitioners, it means that our practitioners from our partner cities and the regions, they also transcend their ways of working together to bring research into their work so that we can integrate our research perspective with practical expertise in our ongoing processes around just climate transitions. And you might ask, how do we do this? We have a number of ways that we're testing and working on. We've just, we're still in our first year. But I think for me, the most important way is that every PhD advising group has 2 academic advisors and 1 practitioner from our public partners. And I, for example, am working with 2 PhD groups, 2 PhD projects in Gothenburg, 1 with the city and 1 with the region. And for want of a better word, I would say that our advising meetings are they're just great. I mean, we continually discuss what's going on in practice, and specifically how the project can link up to ongoing process around urban governance issues, as well as we want the projects, of course, to link into their academic base, to the theory, to the different studies that have been done, to all of the academic demands and discussions that are ongoing. So it's this idea of trying to balance both of these. Another example that we've also had a PhD course that's based, what we call a transdisciplinary PhD course that's based on literature and lectures from both research and practice. And it was on dilemmas and conflicts with just climate transitions. So of course this included all of our 7 PhD students, but we also encouraged our both researcher and practitioner advisors to attend. And everyone didn't have time to attend, of course, but we had enough people attending from different disciplines and different our cities and regions that the discussions in the course that they really kind of talked about both practice-based and research-based problems from both disciplines, from many different disciplines, and from our different public organizations in our different cities and the regions involved in the school. So this became a forum, not just for the student learning, but for all of us to learn from each other, in very much of a mutual learning kind of forum, which I think everybody really appreciated. So I guess just to kind of sum it up, the overall goal with the school is to increase our ability together, our joint ability to deal with these urban governance challenges around just climate transitions that occur in these 3 different cities and in our different regions. So to do this, we want to develop different types of activities and processes that can support collaboration so that we can identify the research questions and processes that are most relevant right now for dealing with urban governance for just climate transitions. We're testing ideas, as I said. We've kind of just started. We're moving into the end of our first year, but we're testing new ideas and ways of working together. We're also trying to be adaptable and also to see what needs come up and to anticipate the different types of needs we might be having, to work a bit proactively. And I guess overall, I would say that it's a very exciting learning process for all of us.
Thank you, Merit. Now over to 2 of the public practitioner partners of this initiative who will share some reflections on what this means for them. We will first hear from Line de Verdier, who is a regional developer at Västra Götaland. And Line, you are with us online. And you will be followed by Kristoffer Palmestål at the City of Gothenburg in a pre-recorded contribution on how the Just Transitions Research School responds to their needs. So Line, please share some of your reflections so far.
Hi, and thank you for the possibilities to share some reflections so far. Firstly, the region of Västra Götaland comprises as many as 49 municipalities in 4 subregions with 1.7 million inhabitants. So it's a diverse landscape ranging from major cities, coastal areas, and more sparsely populated areas. The region's main objectives are to provide the conditions for good public health, a rich cultural life, a good environment, jobs, research, education, and good communications. Although the local government structures are comparable, they vary in size and capacity. That creates a diverse context with variable conditions and needs for climate changes, which in turn can generate conflicts. Research has shown us that we already have an unequal geographical development within and between regions in Sweden as well as in other parts of the world. And in terms of income, education, health, access to work and welfare services. A development that leaves certain geographical contexts, such as smaller and peripheral municipalities, in a vulnerable situation and contributes to local competition, maybe between municipalities as well as regional level. Also, the flow of resources that tends to move from rural to urban areas has negative ecological impacts and contributes to overconsumption of natural resources and unsustainable agricultural practices, which both weaken ecosystems and can affect geological conditions. So maybe you already said it and maybe some of you will come back to it, but we are currently failing to make the necessary changes required to both limit the environmental impact and adapt to risk caused by climate change. So our thought so far is that we maybe need to change some of the structures in the society, organize ourselves differently, establish new objectives, and find new forms of collaboration. So the region is a role in a multidimensional and complex system. How can our region maintain the competitiveness and strength while we are on the same time ensuring that this is done by a fair distribution of the regional resources, services, and equality for the entire region? So we as a region need more knowledge about the distribution of resources, for example, by comparing the allocation of resources and investments in relation to the geography and social and economic situation. Is there a potential for changes in the economic system regarding planning issues, for example? We need more knowledge about what a role our region already have and can play in a spatial development process gathering all municipalities. We need to better understand how things could be done differently by exploring what a just transition is related to planning issue and at a regional level. So this is why the collaborations with other regions, municipalities and universities and doctoral students are so important to us. The research school allows us to work transdisciplinary to formulate both problems, analyze them, and then work together with the integration application of the knowledge. And that's what's interesting with the research school. So far, we have studied together, as Mary mentioned, that what is a just climate transition, and it was quite abstract, I would say, from a practitioner's view. So I have to say that the next step for us, I think, is to add another layer with the practitioner's views, our experiences, and responsibility. So if we are going to be able to involve, for example, politicians and inhabitants and make a real difference. A challenge for the transformation is there are great uncertainties and risks in the world right now that are already affecting us. Can we keep focusing and be able to speed up the transition? But hopefully we can keep on transforming our region, and that the research school is one of our tools to do that. Thank you.
My name is Christopher Palmstad. I work as an environment analyst at the Environment Administration of the City of Gothenburg, and I'm also program coordinator for the City of Gothenburg Environment and Climate Program. The City of Gothenburg has set ambitious climate targets that we need to achieve together with our likewise ambitious goals to create an equal city. The Just Transition Graduate School allows us to further investigate the challenges of creating a just transition and find ways to achieve a more vertical integration of the issues in our organization. To achieve a just transition, we need to find positive synergies between ecological and social issues in the climate transition, as well as finding ways to avoid conflicts between our goals. We hope the transdisciplinary approach and ambition of the Just Transition School will help us expand the city's understanding on how to do this, as well as help us create forums within the city to explore these issues across traditional administration boundaries. We need to find new ways to address these issues and build up our capacity for change within the city. So far, it has been a very enlightening experience for me personally, and that's given me a deeper understanding of the different aspects within a just transition, and given me a language to discuss and tackle these issues on a more detailed level. We have a lot of previous experience of research collaboration, but the ambition of the Just Transition Graduate School goes further than our usual partnerships by embedding a graduate student within our organization, which is both exciting and challenging. We are currently working close together with the PhD student to match the city's goals and needs with the student's research interest to make sure that the collaboration leads to results that have an actual impact on how we govern our city towards a just transition.
Thank you, Lina, and to Christopher as well for pointing to how this is a matter of interest and relevant for you in your roles in the local governance system in Sweden. And we'll pick up on some of the things you mentioned, Lina, in a panel discussion shortly. But first, we go to Gavin Nilsson-Lewis, who is one of the PhD students in our Just Transitions Research School. Gavin has a background in environmental justice and urban planning, and before starting his PhD, he was with Dark Matter Labs and Viable Cities. Gavin is now at Linköping University at Tema T and is working with Sandra Victor at Linköping Municipality, exploring how to strengthen their just transition efforts within their overarching climate neutral 2030 mission. Gavin, you are now about 6 months into your PhD. Can you share with us, how's it going being a doctoral student in this context? What are you most excited about, and what do you hope to achieve?
Thanks, Kristen, for the introduction and the questions. Yeah, and it's going well, and I definitely agree with Christopher and what Merit said. It's both exciting and incredibly challenging, the work we have ahead. But that's exactly what I wanted to do with my PhD, work at the intersection of climate action and justice, and take an applied or a transdisciplinary approach to the work and have the opportunity to work with Linköping. What am I excited about? I think this program and our work is coming at a critical time when we both know we need to accelerate our transition, and we also recognize that what we're doing is not enough. Cities realize their role in the transition, and both in their ability to engage and listen to citizens, but also influence our way of life and our built environment and how we move and work and what we eat. And also there's also a growing recognition, as Rikard detailed, of that the climate crisis is an interconnected crisis and one rooted in justice. You know, both historic injustice that created the climate crisis, the impacts of climate change are unequal and already impacting the most vulnerable and who are least responsible for climate change. And in addition to that, as we accelerate our transition, there's the potential that our actions both benefit some and harm others, and could potentially reinforce existing inequalities or injustices. But thankfully, there is a large call or a growing movement for a just transition, and the awareness that we need to merge our climate action with other issues in our society, whether it's inequality or health or job security or democratic issues. And I think this is critical because reframing climate change or the climate crisis as an issue of injustice broadens the scope of what we need to do, or what we define or see as the solutions necessary, what we see as the innovations that are required. For example, moving beyond technological solutions, which are essential but are only a part of the puzzle, and addressing issues of inequality and extreme wealth, ownership of our resources, and the management of our organizations, as well as issues of participation, as well as moving beyond things of efficiency but potentially sufficiency, and also, as others have highlighted, questioning our underlying economic system and our overarching societal goals. And I think in doing that, and in addition to examining who may benefit, who may be harmed, and who should be supported in the transition, can help us develop or lead action that is both more fair and both supported as well. And so what am I hoping to get out of this program or this work? Well, we already know that cities all over Sweden and around the world are asking the same question of what does this look like in practice and on the ground. And so that's exactly what we're starting to do right now, taking the time to learn about Linköping, what they're doing at the moment, and what are their current challenges, and also exploring what other cities are doing, and then also, of course, digging into the vast range of research and literature that's out there that can support the work ahead. And hopefully together across our 7 projects, we can build awareness of what a just transition can mean and build capacity within each of the organizations, as well as hopefully develop some new processes and tools that can both support the just transition here, but also inspire others. Yeah.
Thank you, Gavin. Stefan Holmlid, you are a professor in design at Linköping University and director of the Just Transitions Research School, and our final speaker before we move on to a panel discussion. Now, the Research School wants to build capacity and competence for a just climate transition at local and regional levels. What does this mean?
Oh, that's the small question, right? But it's really good. And I think, one of the things is that this is exactly what the Research School are doing. So Gavin and the 6 PhD students, we will know more in a couple of years when they're done. But of course there are things that we know, and we've heard a bit of that from the other speakers too. So one of the things here is that we're talking about 2 different types or kinds of capacity. So and one of those is the capacity of the public, or each of us maybe, to participate and to drive transition. And that's a capacity that we need. Gavin alluded to that a little bit. And so it's not only something that is somewhere else. It's here, I'm part of that capacity, etc. There's also the other kind of capacity that has to do with this governance thing that we're doing in the Research School. And then we're talking about the capacity of the governance structures that we have around us, so that we're also participating in different ways. In these governance structures, we both need to work with capacity and capability. So capacity in that sense could be knowledge, and the people that have that knowledge, and the way that how much we have of that, right? And then capability is the manner in which we can use those capacities for our purposes and goals. So when we work with these organizational issues, we need to handle both of those. So it also means then that, and we've heard that from multiple of the speakers here, right? That there's knowledge that is needed, and that's a capacity that we need to create in these organizations. We also need to, like Lina was saying, we need to create new ways of working. And that is not so easy in these governance structures. And I'll get back to one of the reasons why that is in a little bit. But we also need to disrupt some of the old capabilities that are in place in order to give room for new capacities to be able to be used in those purposeful ways. And in the end, we need to find ways of maintaining the new ways of working, the new capacities, the new capabilities. So we both need to create, disrupt, and maintain both capacities and capabilities in the organizations. And that thing with doing things in new ways, one of the issues here, and well, that's one of the reasons why it's transdisciplinary also, like Merit was talking about, and the challenges that all of the speakers have talked about is that we merge different knowledge traditions, knowledge types. And when we do that, the way of understanding each other will need to change. There cannot be the old ways in which decisions are made that still will necessarily be done in the same way. We need to acknowledge that there are new knowledge types that needs to be in place to make those really difficult decisions on the capacity, the capability, and the actual actions that we need to do. I mean, we're trying to understand how these capacities and capabilities can be built through those transdisciplinary measures that Merit was talking about in the research school. And of course, there will be a lot of things around the research school that will contribute to that learning. So, in one sense, just as a final note, we need that capacity and capability, not to just accelerate climate transitions, but also to accelerate the just climate transitions in the end.
Thank you, Stefan. So we now move on to a panel discussion to reflect on this a bit further. Now, Stefan, Gavin, Line, Rickard, and Merit, we've heard something from all of you now about the motives and ambitions of the research school and the different partners involved. But what are some of the practical challenges as you're working in a complex system and taking a transdisciplinary approach to the work? Rickard, you were first off, so maybe you can start. Can you expand a bit?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I want to say that I think the process so far has been more rewarding than challenging, actually, and it's very interesting to get the different perspectives from the working outside the kind of the normal working of within the academy and so on. But there are challenges, and maybe looking from the academic perspective, we are often used to be very autonomous in how we kind of frame our research and design the research. And now we, as Merit and others have been speaking about, we have to kind of transcend that a little bit and meet the expectation and hopes and wishes and needs of other actors. And that is could be challenging and so on. But on the other hand, what we get for that is really opportunities to make a difference, and I think that is very kind of appealing for many of us too. So sometimes the academy is spoken of as kind of we're sitting up in this ivory tower, but now we have really to climb down and become relevant, and that is really, I think, interesting yet also challenging.
Merit, anything you'd like to add?
Oh, what? There's a lot, of course. I guess the practical challenges right now, because right now we're focusing on formulating our research questions for the students, and I think that's really exciting. And even though we're having all these great discussions with our advising groups, it's not unproblematic in trying to focus the question or focus the research project, because there's so many important things. And so I think that's where it's critical, because I'm working with Lina and Christopher, and it's so critical. They, even in our organizations, they have so many different areas where we could focus on. So it's really, I think it's a huge challenge trying to really identify, if we're going to reach these capabilities that Stefan talked about, it's really in these capacities. How do we do that? I mean, we have to, that takes a lot of work, and because the best research question, best according to whom and in what context. So I think that's a huge challenge. And right now we're also working on trying to anchor our projects more in the different home organizations, our different partner organizations as well. And how do we do that in the best way? How do we make sure that these processes aren't isolated, a great TD process that's isolated, but that it's also integrated with the work that's ongoing in our different partner organizations. So I think those are the main challenges right now. But they're going to change through the process as our students develop and as our research projects are carried out.
Thank you. Lina, what are some of the challenges for you, I think?
I think one of the challenges is that we don't have time enough for the transformation needs to be done now, quickly. How do we get the tools and how do we get the knowledge? Because we need to make a change for real in a short time. And our structure as a regional level is quite complex, and we are in a quite difficult, complex situation. So how are we working together in new ways, finding new tools to be implemented as soon as possible? Thank you.
Gavin, are there any challenges involved?
Of course. To name one, I think I agree with Merit. it's narrowing down the focus of my work, and because the climate change and climate transition and justice cut across all levels of all sectors or levels of society. So it's quite challenging, and I'm interested in quite a lot of things. So it's, yeah, and Lynn Shopping is also doing a lot. So it's this balance of, you know, connecting my interest and what's out there in research and what Lynn Shopping is working with on the ground, and finding a way to balance these interests and merge these ideas from research and practice. That is, it's exciting, but yeah, that is a big challenge at the moment. Yeah.
So Stefan, I think I'll introduce you to a new question. I know it's still early on. It's been a year since this was launched and 6 months since the doctoral students started their studies. But Line and Christopher mentioned some takeaways already. And I'd like to hear from all of you, starting with you. What have you learned, or what are your biggest takeaways so far?
So far, takeaways. Well, I usually think I'm still learning, and that's a constant kind of setting maybe. But so one of the things I'm seeing from this is also how we have these, we organized into governance structures, right, with the West kind of cluster of organizations and that East cluster of organizations. And I can already see some of those things that we need from these governance structures. Well, maybe there is not so much action on the ground, but there's a lot of learning in between, and there are things happening in these governance structures that maybe this context has given us a possibility to work with. So that's one of the learnings I have, I think, with, apart from those things that we could expect, like wonderful PhD students wanting to do a lot of things, right, and crashing together with the practice partners, right. But so this governance structures and how they can learn together, I think that's one of my takeaways this far.
How about you, Rickard?
Yeah, it's a bit early to kind of have a final opinion about that, but I think one thing is that, I mean, it's how there are also like large similarities, I think, between academic institutions and how people work in civil servants work in the municipalities and regions. And I've mostly worked with civil society organizations previously in a transdisciplinary way. And there is sometimes talk of the activists as kind of organic intellectuals who are, I mean, they have studied sometimes at our departments, and now they're giving back to us with the experiences that they have made in their activities in civil society. And I think it's kind of the similar experience here. That, I mean, the municipalities, these departments, and at the regions, I'm sure too, they work with methods and theories that are often kind of similar to what we do, but they also kind of add this. They are very well acquainted with their communities and so on. So this exchange, I mean, it's there are challenges that we discussed, but I mean, we understand each other mostly pretty well, I think. So that's a good takeaway so far.
Merit, what are your takeaways this far? What are the top ones?
I think I have two. I think the first one is that there's a lot of experience and a lot of literature on, TD transdisciplinary projects, but there's some literature on transdisciplinary PhD students. But I think that this integrating the transdisciplinary with PhD projects, I think, is something that we're focusing on it, but I think we could learn a lot more about that and focus on that a bit more. So that's one thing that I think that we could develop more. And then my second take is that, I mean, I've worked with practitioners in different ways throughout my entire academic career, and I never cease to be amazed at how much we can learn from each other, and both learning from other researchers in other disciplines, and also, but especially learning from our practitioners in the city and the region and the county. So I think that that's one of my takeaways, that this learning, kind of this internal learning, is just so really, really important, and I think something that we could, as I think Stefan mentioned that as well, that this is something that we could maybe think about. How can we kind of, can we package it? Can we do something more with it? Can we make it a bit more, explicit in how we use it?
Stefan, can we talk about building some type of capacity already? think?
I think so. It would be, I mean, just engaging together, I think, is one of those capacities, right? And just seeing across, we talked about it so many times now, right? Merit talked about it now with the transdisciplinarity, building these connections across knowledge, building places like Rickard was also talking about, right? We build a capacity there to be able to think differently and to be able to do things in new ways in all of these organizations. So it goes back into academia, it goes out into the municipalities and the county board. So I definitely think we're there at least to be able to support each other to build those capacities that we want.
Lina, what are your top takeaways this far in terms of what we need to do to realize just transitions?
Yeah. We are, of course, addressing a lot of changes that need to be done in our development strategy, but are we doing enough, and are we doing it the right way? Can we do it something better? And the potential for the acceleration if we work together is my first takeaway, because we are learning so much from each other already. And I think I'm excited to see what will happen when we try to integrate the research into our ongoing processes. Can we do something more quicker there and change the way we work? I'm excited to see that. But I think what we need to work with now in our organization is what is just climate transition on a regional level. Regarding for planning, is my department's responsible planning for public transport and infrastructure planning and broadband and so on. And what does it mean? Because when we are talked with my colleagues, they are not familiar with just climate transition and what it means. So that's the next step. I think we need to, when we come a little bit further on in our process, is work with the communication, make it simpler, and addressing it both to politicians and the private sector, inhabitants, and so on. So I think we need to make it easier to understand and go and work with the practitioners more to see our experiences, and that's one of the reasons why we are so involved in the research goal. And I think we at the regional level, we definitely have a critical role to play, and we are closest to inhabitants and municipalities, as you already said, and we have a great influence on how to plan where we live, communicate with our municipalities and planning together, how we work and travel and so on. And also how we are using our regional resources, for example, for health and care and transport, how are they combined together in different layers, and what are the effects on social and economical planning, for example. So, yeah.
Final question. I think this initiative is a testament to the need to enable for local projects that build on local actors' own initiatives to achieve climate transitions. What message would you like to send to the listeners of this session who may want to do something similar in their local context? Quick reply from
all of us. Yeah, well, very quick. We'll dare do it. I mean, the challenges are enormous, but it's really worth. Worth trying to collaborate in this way. I think it's has been very rewarding. I think it's going to be. But
the climate transition and justice cuts across all areas of society. So whether you work with mobility or construction or food or digitalization or finance, there's ways to get involved, and it is necessary that all of these areas are involved in the just transition.
Great. Thank you. I think we need to stop there because we're running out of time. I need to wrap up. To those of you who have listened, we hope that this session has inspired you maybe to take your own steps and make arrangements to build capacity for just climate transitions where you are. You can find more information and follow this initiatives on Urban Future's Swedish webpage, urbanfutures.se, where you also find our contact details. Thank you for listening. Take care.